This is the Haulin Assets podcast where we show you how to start and run your own trucking company. Ever wanted to go out on your own? Follow Chris as he goes through the highs and lows of running on his own authority. Welcome, everybody, to the Haulin Assets podcast. This is episode number 61. I am Craig, and he is...
Chris.
Chris, how you doing?
I'm doing well. How about you, Craig?
I'm all right. It has been a couple of weeks since I've seen you, so hope things are going well, out on the road or back in the office, whatever you're doing these days.
Doing too much, but that's a good thing. It just gets old sometimes.
Well, so do you, Chris.
Yeah, older every day. Hence, we're recording on Tuesday and publishing tomorrow.
That's right.
I've kind of been putting this off a little bit.
We're right under the wire, but that's all right. We'll be just fine.
Good thing you're so good at burning the midnight oil.
Today we're talking about kind of a continuation of a topic that we were on a few weeks ago. Today is going to be looking to the future. This is another kind of leadership or business aspect or trait, I guess, that Chris wants to put out there.
It's kind of an extension, like you mentioned, of the podcast episode we did a couple weeks ago where it talks about being deliberate. Do you play chess by chance?
I mean, I know the rules.
So you and I are about the same.
I am terrible at chess.
I'm not a chess player by any means. I can beat a 10-year-old who is a beginner chess person, maybe.
Right.
Anybody more advanced than that, probably not so good.
I don't have the patience for that.
That's a big part of my problem. But you know what makes a good chess player a good chess player?
Right. Looking ahead, right?
Yeah,
knowing 5 moves ahead.
Exactly. They 4 or 5, whatever moves ahead, they can see that. They can kind of see the future. They can anticipate things. And that's really a good critical skill for a business owner. And that's one of the things that we're going to talk about today is, are you able as a business owner to kind of vision where you want to be 6 months from now or a year from now or even 5 years and beyond from now? And we're going to dive a little bit more into that during this episode.
Right. And after we do that, we're also going to talk very briefly about some new hours of service rules that have just come out. So you're going to give a few pennies worth of thoughts on that.
Yep.
And so you can look forward to that if you've been just burning to hear our opinions on the new hours of service rules. Yes, we will get to that. So... Chris, before we get to the main topic then, any stories from the road or anything else that you want to share before we get going?
No stories from the road today, but I do want to talk a little bit about kind of what's going on in the marketplace. And to be honest with you, I mean, we've talked a little bit about this last week with the profit and loss episode or a couple weeks ago. The spot market right now is just really, really good, and it's still showing really, really good. And I think that's probably going to keep going at least through the end of this year and hopefully even a little bit into next year as well.
Chris, I'm betting most of our listeners would know, but I speak for all the rest of us when I say, what the heck is the spot market?
The spot market. So you've got in the freight world, you've got the regular freight, the stuff that every Monday we're going to pick up this load and we're going to take it here and pick up another load and come back. That's kind of your more dedicated contract. You've got a dedicated truck that's hauling
right.
loads, where the spot market is more, hey, all of a sudden we have this extra load, or we're a company that only has a load that needs to get delivered once a week. Most of that stuff goes out onto the spot market. And so
spot comma Johnny on the
that's a certain part of it.
Right.
Yeah,
now
something just all of a sudden, hey, here's a load, it needs to get hauled, you throw it up onto a load board and it gets taken care of. It's not that regular, reliable freight.
Okay.
And so the spot market fluctuates a lot more, and especially quickly. It can turn on a dime. All of a sudden it can spike and get really crazy, and then it can drop off the face of the earth really quick. And right now, for the last several months, it's been going pretty gangbusters. And I think it's probably going to continue to do that. Usually the fourth quarter, what we talk about, all the Christmas and holiday rush, the holiday season, the spot market always goes way up towards the end of the year. And it even started doing that really in July, August, September of this year. And it continues to do that. And it should through the end of the year as well.
Yeah. So that must be good news. If Q3 is seeing good numbers, then it's unlikely that there will be a dip in Q4.
Probably not. Even if it just holds steady from where it's at the end of the third quarter, it should be a really good fourth quarter.
Very nice. Okay. So how does that relate to what you want to talk about as far as being a chess master, owner, operator?
Well, we'll get into that in just a little bit, but I think one of the things that, in this kind of a situation when the spot market's going really well, you should be able to haul freight at pretty good rates. That usually means you're a little bit more profitable than usual and you have a little bit more money in your pocket than you normally would. So
I'm hearing a savings lecture coming.
Oh, what do you know? What do you think? Before I could even get the words out of my mouth, you're leading into it.
60 episodes, 61 episodes, Chris.
Learned.
I've got your patterns.
We've been friends for like a year and a half now. I'm pretty predictable, aren't I?
Yeah, well, you know what? Sometimes that's a good thing.
Sometimes it is. But yeah, so this is a time that you can kind of prepare for the future a little bit. You may not be ready to make a big move, but this kind of a time is one opportunity to get you to where you need to be. So you should be having a little bit of extra money. And there's really two things you should be able to do. If you're still kind of new in your business life cycle, your business is still kind of establishing itself, you should definitely set that money aside for one of two things, either for a rainy day, so you've got your emergency fund, or you set it aside if you plan on growing into a larger fleet. That's good growth money that you can set aside, build up, and then once you've got enough money and you're ready and able, you go on and you start adding units to your fleet.
Well, you were reminding me, speaking of the possibility of growing into a fleet, like you've said in the past, growing to a fleet may not be something that everybody wants to do, but some people will have that as a goal. And in order to accomplish that, it's going to be necessary for you to make goals, right? A 6-month goal, 1-year goal, 5-year goal. And that's kind of what you're talking about, right? I'm seeing a mesh here between the idea of trying to see ahead, see a few moves ahead, and having those goals in the future, right?
Exactly. I mean, just to oversimplify this just a little bit, if your goal is to, eventually become a 5-truck fleet and you've only got 1 truck right now, well, your next step's going to be
2 trucks.
2 trucks. And after a certain period of time, you should have a pretty good idea of how much money you need in the bank before you're ready to make that leap and buy that second truck. And so it's just, in a time like this, when money's coming in pretty well and things are going as well as can be expected, you sock that money aside until you hit that kind of trigger point when you've got enough money and you can purchase that second truck.
Right. So anything else that you want to talk about as far as saving money? And because I'll be honest, Chris, from where I'm sitting, a lot of what you say is, okay, whatever you do, if things are going great, don't have any fun, right? Don't do anything fun. Just save all your money, right? Is that what you're saying?
No, that's not what I'm saying. That's a good thought. And that kind of brings me to my next point on this is maybe you're to the point where you've kind of hit where you want to be size-wise with your fleet. So whether that's an owner-operator with 1 truck or somebody's got a 10-truck fleet, you've hit that size, you've got enough of that emergency fund saved up, you're ready to go. That's when you can kind of start taking some of that extra money out of the business and doing fun things with it. And let me kind of tell you what my philosophy is with that. Instead of just going out and kind of spending that money willy-nilly, I'm pretty deliberate. And I think I've talked a little bit about this in the past of how I spend that extra money. So in all of my businesses, I pay myself like a salary. And so in the trucking world, you'd be paying yourself as a driver or as the manager that runs the business. I pay myself a reasonable salary with that. And that's what I have my day-to-day expenses with. That's what I pay my house or mortgage or rent payment with. If I've got a car, I'm either saving some of that money, setting aside for another car, or I'm making a car payment with that money. Because that's kind of like my more guaranteed, reliable, steady income, right? Does that make sense?
Yep.
But on these times when, hey, I've come to the end of the third quarter. The third quarter was really, really good. I made more money in it than I normally do. I've got a little bit extra money to play with. I take that money, if I plan on using it personally, taking it out of the business, I use it for a one-time purchase. So either I set it aside to save for a car or something like that, or I go on vacation. But one thing I do not do is I'm not going to say, oh, you know what? I'm going to take that money and I'm going to make a down payment on a car. Because then if you're just making a down payment on a car, all of a sudden now you've got a car payment that has to be made. And it's kind of outside of your regular personal budget because, that money was kind of a one-time thing. You don't know if you're going to have that good of a quarter, the fourth quarter or the first quarter next year. So you don't know if you're going to have that extra money. You can't really rely on it. So you shouldn't make purchases where you're going to have to all of a sudden, be strapped down and be forced to pull money out of your business to make a payment when you may not be able to.
Well, this is kind of the whole chess master thing that you're talking about, right? Seeing a few moves ahead where, okay, so Q3 was great and I made $10,000 extra in profit for the business. Great. Fantastic. Congratulations. But the reason that it felt so great was that Q1 and Q2 were a bit of a struggle compared to Q3, right? And so looking ahead into the future, well, maybe Q1 and Q2 will be the same thing next year, and we need to be prepared for that, right? That's that chess move that you're talking about.
That's a big part of it. You've got to be able to see to the future. And you can't, it's just really, you're not living by the seat of your pants. You're being deliberate
right
in all that you do, and you're looking to the future. It's you're going to have ups and downs, and you make decisions, and you're smart so that you can navigate both the ups and the downs in that are normal in any kind of business you've got out there.
Yeah. Okay, so where do you want to go from here on this topic, Chris?
Next, I'd kind of like to talk a little bit about a key trait that I find in most successful people.
And when you say successful, you mean financially successful business owners and the kind of people that we're trying to educate, I assume?
Yeah, that's a big part of it. But they're also, they're successful in other areas. They may be successful in academics. Just people that in general are successful. And I think this key trait is really, it translates into whatever kind of life you lead in your professional and even in your personal world.
Okay, and what is that trait?
People that I've seen that are successful like that take personal responsibility for everything that they do. So you take, for instance, they don't blame other people for their circumstances or issues that they have. And I really, truly, firmly believe that if you want to elevate your station in life, if you want to get to a higher, better, more comfortable, socioeconomic sphere, you've got to take responsibility for what you do.
So what does that look like in practical terms then? You're making me think of accountability. I'm self-reliant. I should say I'm reliable as far as getting things done without needing somebody to tell me to do them. Is that part of it?
I think that's a big part of it. I think a big part of it is just realizing that to a certain extent, you're in control of your own destiny. You're the one who sets your course, who sets your path, who decides how you're going to react to certain situations. You take, for example, if you are having a hard time finding a load that doesn't pay well, or you're having a hard time, establishing relationships with brokers, instead of, blaming some tough times or anything like that on brokers, you're going to take responsibility for it and just realize, okay, well, maybe I need to go out and find different brokers, or I need to figure out a different way to make things work. I need to develop relationships with more shippers and rely less on brokers. You're not the kind of person that's just out there complaining that,
playing the victim game.
Playing the victim game. Yeah, that's a really good way of putting it. You're not playing the victim game. You realize that if I want my life to change, if I want my circumstances to get better, I've got to be the one that takes the bull by the horns and makes that happen. Right. Nobody else is going to do it for me.
It's, if you want your company to succeed, nobody else is going to make that happen, right? Because nobody else has any sort of vested interest. To a limited extent, maybe, your broker, your dispatcher, they count on these businesses to give them business, right? But that doesn't mean that they're going to be able to hold your hand.
They're not the ones that are going to have the vision and help you find that path to get you to where you want to be as far as your vision goes.
Right.
It's kind of one of those things. I kind of compare it to, I've got a couple teenagers.
Sure.
And one of the things that really kind of drives me nuts, and I find this not just in my teenagers, but most teenagers out there, I think it's kind of that point in life, that period in life. A lot of the times teenagers feel like they're entitled to certain things, right? My kids think sometimes they're entitled to a cell phone. They're entitled to fancy clothes. And I try to teach them, I try to show them that they're not entitled to that kind of thing. For me, as their father, they get a few, basic things. They're entitled to food. They're entitled to a roof over their head, to clothes, and not that fancy, brand name clothes.
Do we even know what the brand names are these days? I sure don't.
Wasn't it like Gucci jeans or something when I was a kid?
Idea.
Yeah, I didn't get any of that kind of stuff. and so maybe that's why I'm such a jerk now. But I look at some of my kids' friends that have, the latest and greatest iPhone, and my kids just, realize and learn that they're not entitled to those kind of things. If they want those kind of things, they have to go out and get it. Being a business owner it's not an easy thing. And sometimes it is easy to get or to fall into that entitlement trap and feel like, what we're entitled to a certain level of success. We work hard. We should be able to get it. But as owners, we are the ones responsible to ensure we get to that level of success that we want. It's not the brokers. It's not the shippers. It's not your dispatchers. It's not anyone else. It is you as the owner or me as the owner that needs to take the responsibility and ensure we are able to reach our vision and get to the point where we want to be and attain the level of success that we want. There's things that come along with that, and there's always a little bit of luck, but nobody else is going to make it happen besides ourselves. Yeah.
No, I like what you said earlier. The broker, the dispatcher, whoever else you work with, business to business, they don't have the vision. They may want you to succeed, but they don't care the way that you care about the future, right?
They don't.
They're not thinking ahead in your chess game, right? They're playing their own game.
And that's one of the things that I've seen every good leader has is they have that vision that gets you there. If you don't have a vision, you're just going to kind of wander aimlessly and really never get anywhere. Every great leader has vision. And you may ask yourself, well, I'm just an owner operator. I'm not really a leader. Do I need vision? And I would say that's absolutely the wrong attitude, because even as an owner operator, you are the leader of your company. Even if it's just you're the leader of that company. You're the one that's going to navigate and steer the rudder to get you to where you want to be. You're the leader of yourself too. You've got to be self-motivated.
Yeah.
There's that's not an easy position to be in sometimes.
This reminds me of a conversation I had with the CEO of a company that I worked for at one point in my life. I won't reveal which one, but he and I were, if not close, at least close enough to have this kind of conversation where they were thinking about instituting no more meetings on Fridays, and that's when you had a lot of the manager and employee one-on-ones, and that time for accountability. And he's like, really, we just want to free up time for all these creative people to make content or whatever they do, to design and code and write and all this stuff. And he says, I really just want to cultivate this self-sufficiency in the company. And I said, well, you're kind of thinking about this the wrong way. If we were all that self-sufficient, or self-motivating, we'd be out running our own companies. We're a bunch of employees because we need the accountability and we need those meetings to keep us on track, to keep us focused. That's what we have managers for, Anyway, and so if you're thinking about becoming an owner operator, or if you've been doing it for a little while and you're not quite seeing the success that you want to, maybe that's part of it. How motivated are you to get out, not just to hit the road and drive a bunch, but how motivated are you to make those relationships and to find ways to market and grow the company and all those kinds of other than driving owner things, right?
So sometimes being that owner operator, it's a lonely job because you're the only one there. You're the only one doing it, and you're truly only accountable to yourself. You're not accountable to any of your employees to make the business successful, and so that can be a hard thing sometimes. And so you do have to lead yourself and motivate yourself and provide that vision to yourself and follow that vision. It's just as important for an owner operator as it is for an owner of a fleet of 100 trucks.
Right. And I imagine this was all pretty easy for you to pick up with your background on the farm, right?
Yeah, that's a great transition because next I want to talk about some of my life on the farm.
Well, right, because you and my dad shared that neither of you stayed on the farm, but you grew up on the farm and picked up a lot of this work ethic, this self-starter attitude and that's what made me think of it is that part of the conversation.
It was a really good period in my life. I learned a ton from it, and there's a lot of things that you can kind of relate to. So you take, for example, I was thinking a little bit about this a few days ago. When I was working on the farm, one of my responsibilities in the summertime was to move the irrigation pipe. We just called it moving pipe. And my grandpa's farm had hand lines that you literally picked up, walked, a section of pipe, 40, 50 feet, set it down, hooked it back up, and then went and grabbed the next piece and just kind of kept doing that. And then he had the more fancy wheel move systems, not the center pivots that kind
Right.
of go on their own, but a wheel move that twice a day. So like, once in the morning and once in the evening, you'd turn the water off, let the pipes drain. Then you'd hook this little motor up to it on the end, and the motor would move the whole section of line at once, that 40 or 50 feet to the next riser where you'd hook it back up and then water the next section of the field. Well, that little motor was a little tiny, 1-cylinder Briggs & Stratton engine. And I remember, if you just sat there, it was a pull start, kind of like you have on lawnmowers. You'd sit there and you'd pull it and you'd pull it. With the Briggs & Stratton engine, it had this little black bubble that you would kind of have to push, and it would prime the carburetor with some fuel. And if you did that, every time you'd pull it, it'd almost infallibly start with the first pull.
Right.
But if you didn't prime it first, you could sit there and pull forever and ever and ever, and the thing would maybe not even start. So priming that pump was a incredibly important piece of making that engine start.
You could have just gone with lawnmowers on this one, Chris. We all know lawnmowers.
Yeah, I probably should have.
No, sorry, go on. Okay, so now that I've ruined your point, what's your point?
So the point is that you've got to prime that pump on the motor, the engine, to get it to start. And it's the same thing with your business. You've got to do things that kind of prime it so that it will take off. And if you don't do those things, you're either never going to get started, or if you do, you're just going to kind of putter along and you're never going to really take off like you should. And so some of those critical things for priming your pump in your business are some of the things that aren't always the sexiest and funnest things to do, like developing those relationships with shippers and brokers.
And when you say that, I want to just expound on that a little bit. We talk about this in lots of our episodes, building those relationships. What does that actually mean? Is it just as simple as talking to them?
That is. That's where it starts, is just, picking up the phone and making some phone calls.
Right.
Or when you're delivering loads, going in and, talking to the people that you're delivering with and kind of figuring out who the decision makers are in that business. That's where it starts. And then it's just becoming familiar with them. People typically want to work with people they like and people they're familiar with. And so if you're not developing that kind of relationship, you're not initially talking to them, you're not trying to find a way that you can help them or solve problems for them, you're not developing that relationship, and you're never going to get your foot in the door.
Gotcha.
And that kind of thing, it's not like you can just talk to them one time and say, hey, I gave it my best effort, I tried. You have to constantly talk and develop that relationship. I remember I was trying to develop a relationship one time with an association a while back, and they get used to so many people coming in and trying to make a presence, and they'll stick around for 2 or 3 months, and then they kind of fall off the ladder and don't come back anymore. Well, you've got to be the one that kind of sticks to it and stays with that relationship. And if you do that, eventually you'll work your way in and develop the relationship that ultimately is going to provide some meaningful benefits. And it's the same way with shippers and brokers, and really whoever else you deal with in business. They're getting their door knocked down by tons of different people, but 95% of those people are going to quit really quick. If you're the one that kind of sticks around, they're gonna see that, they're gonna pay attention to that, and ultimately it's going to lead to that relationship, and you're going to set yourself apart from everybody else.
Right. So what are some other priming the engine things that you want to mention?
Apart from just, some other things you can do to kind of build relationships with brokers. Every time we haul a load for a broker or shipper, I always, shoot them an email, thanking them for taking the load and just let them know that we'd like to haul more for them, especially if it was, one of the better loads that we've done. And I'll even, oftentimes shoot them an email and just say, hey, when's your busy time of year? When can I pick up some additional loads from you and kind of make their lives a little bit easier. And, a lot of the times those kind of things are seasonal, and they can say, well, hey, talk to me in September. That's when things start to get really busy for us. And if you can, be there for them, oftentimes that's kind of how those relationships get started.
Yeah, absolutely. Anything else?
Another one is saving. We've talked a little bit about how, preparation is a big part of luck. It's the same thing with saving your money. In a time like we're talking about now, where rates are pretty good, you should be able to set aside a little bit of extra money if you're trying to grow your business or you're trying to make it more financially stable. saving money and having that in there there's no better way to kind of prime that engine to really be able to take off than by saving money and having the ability to say, hey, you know what? Now's the right time to jump in with another truck. Things are going really well. We'll maximize it. I'm ready to go. You've got the money. You do it. That's another great way to prime the pump.
You know what that reminds me of is Apple. Apple was around for 30, 35 years before they became a truly terrifying corporate giant that could buy anything on the planet. And how did they do that? By getting, what did they have? Like $1 trillion in cash?
Yeah, something crazy.
Insane number of, amount of cash. And anyway, but okay, so you're not Apple. We're not Apple. But the point remains that that was how they became the company that nobody could really challenge for a long time. I don't know if they're still there. I don't really care, honestly. But the point is that it was that saving money, looking to the future, knowing that they needed to have this set aside for whatever came up, right? Yeah. Looking into the future and not quite knowing what was going to happen. But the other thing I was going to mention is that it took them 30 years to get there, right? This isn't something that happens overnight.
Yeah, it's not like the Briggs and Stratton motor where I push the primer 2 times and then pull the cord and it's going to start right away.
Right.
You in your business, you've got to prime that pump for a long time, and eventually it'll take off. And when it does, it'll take off really well. It's not going to happen overnight, especially in trucking. I mean, most brokers and shippers really won't work with you until you've been in business for a year. That's not when you're going to start to get the cream of the crop as far as loads go and the best paying loads and all the best things. So really that whole first year, you're kind of just doing things that's priming the pump. You're just priming. And then, after that first year and you can start to develop more relationship with shippers and you get, a little bit better at what you do and know where the best rates are, that's when things are really going to start to take off.
Very nice. Okay, so where else do we want to go with this? Is this, do we feel like we've covered this idea of looking into the future, or do you have any final thoughts?
I think I've got just a little bit more of some final thoughts, just kind of along the lines that my point really here is that you need to learn how to stand on your own ground. You can't be looking outside of yourself to make sure you're standing on solid ground. You're the one that puts yourself on solid ground. The whole victim mentality comes when you don't figure out how to stand on your own. And then, when hard times hit, you're typically blaming other people and instead of really looking at yourself and realizing, you know what, I'm the one who's going to take me into a better situation. I'm the one that's going to put me on firmer ground. You're going to be the most successful when you truly take responsibility for your own situations, and you're the one that creates the action plan to make things happen. That's one of the things that the military has really taught me well, is that oftentimes it's better to get moving, even if your plan is incomplete, because you're actually taking action. You're doing something rather than just kind of sitting stagnant, waiting for the perfect plan to be formed. Oftentimes you're way better off and you're much further ahead starting with an incomplete plan versus waiting for that perfect plan. If you wait long enough, even if you do get a perfect plan, you're still never going to be able to catch up with that guy that just got going and made it happen.
So what, if I understand right, I'm hearing that what you're saying is there's a balance between planning and action.
Yeah.
And you've got to find that balance. You can't plan so long that you never accomplish anything, but you also can't run so hard at the day-to-day menial tasks that you have no time to have a vision and plan for the future.
Your vision and your plan doesn't have to be perfect, but you do need to get started. You need to have one and it needs to be decent, but you're going to be way better off in most situations getting that 75% solution, getting started and going, and then refining things as time goes on.
Figure it out as you go.
Yeah, a lot of the times, I mean, who was it, Mike Tyson, that said, everybody's got a plan until they get punched in the mouth?
Right.
That's so. Even if your plan's perfect, as soon as that first bump in the road comes along, it's probably going to change anyway. So don't get wrapped around the fact thinking that you need to have a perfect plan.
Yeah.
Just take responsibility for your actions, go out and do things, and just realize you're the one that makes things happen, and go make things happen.
Very nice. Okay, Chris. So I know that in this episode, we also wanted to talk briefly about the new hours of service rules. I'm sure that most people listening have probably heard of this, but you wanted to share a couple of thoughts on it.
I'm sure most people have, and they went into effect on the 29th of September, 2020. So the hours of service rules, they don't change super often, but they do on occasion. And there were 4 big main changes that just happened right now. It's kind of interesting because, I'll watch comment boards and blogs and stuff within the industry, and you've got this group of people who thinks they're the worst changes ever made. Then you've got this other group of people that thinks they're really good. Well, I'm kind of more, so it's really your perspective. And I think from an owner operator's perspective, for the most part, the changes are very, very good because all of them give you more flexibility, can allow you to run a little bit harder in certain situations, and all in all are going to be beneficial. And even for drivers, for the most part, they're going to be, especially there's a big change to the 30-minute break requirement. If you remember right, Craig, you've got to take a 30-minute break from the time that you first go on duty, after you've been on duty before you hit the 8-hour mark, you have to go on break for 30 minutes. Well, in the past, you had to either be on sleeper berth or off duty to count that as your break. Well, now they'll let you actually be on duty for part of your break or all of your break. So for instance,
what does that mean? So
where I see this happening a lot is you're driving and you need to get fuel. Well, now when you get fuel, you have to be on duty. You're still operating, yeah. You're on duty, and fueling, by the time you fuel, if you need to put DEF in, if you need to fill the reefer, you're typically at least 15 minutes washing the windshields and anything like that. In a typical fuel stop, at least 15 minutes. So now you can count that 15 minutes towards part of that 30-minute break. Then the last 15 minutes you can just put off duty. And so now you can get back on the road a little bit sooner, which means you're going to hit your 11-hour driving window a little bit sooner. And so really that, in my estimation, in most situations, this is an everyday thing that's going to shorten your day by 15 minutes. So you can be off duty and stop driving kind of just a little bit sooner.
Feels like a common sense reform from where I'm sitting, in my inexperienced chair.
I think it is. And so I think that's a really good one. The other ones, similar type things, they just add a little bit more flexibility with how you do your workday. And there are some of them why some people are complaining about it, because there are some situations where it's going to lengthen your day a little bit. It could potentially lengthen your day. But I think for the most part, especially for owner operators, it gives you a little bit more flexibility and the ability to smartly run a little bit harder.
All right. Very nice. Anything else on these changes?
That's that about sums it up.
Okay, very good. Well, hopefully you have, and I'm speaking to you listening right now, hopefully you've heard of these, and if not, please go look them up. Make sure that you're familiar with the changes. If you have any questions, let us know. We'll be happy to address questions in future episodes, and that goes for any other topic as well, including the previous topic of, being an owner for yourself, looking to the future and taking accountability for your actions and all that. Whatever we talked about, Chris, it's already out of my mind.
All that good stuff.
No, thank you very much for listening, everybody. And make sure that you go, I neglected to say this at the beginning of the episode, but make sure you go to HaulinAssetsLLC.com for full show notes on this and other episodes that we've done. And we'd love to see you also at motorcarrierhq.com if you want to see any of the materials that we've talked about in previous episodes. And then lastly, I will say, find us on Facebook and give us a review. Review us. I think you can give us a thumbs up on Facebook if you find the page. Give it a like. Give it a follow.
Give us a like. We'd like that.
And head on to iTunes or whatever it's called these days. Give it a like and 5 stars and a nice review there. We would love to see some more of those roll in. They really do help, especially stroking Chris's ego. It's very helpful in that regard. So.
I need as much of that as I can get. Just ask my wife.
All right. So thanks again, everybody. And we'll see you next week.
Thanks for listening.